What's up, guys? Missy from Fire Fitness Camp Fond du Lac. So coming at you with another part of our overhead squat series. So Jared and I have been talking to you about the overhead squat assessment that we use in our personal training sessions to help correct muscle imbalances. Well, we figured since you're home, you might as well work on some of those. So I'm going to be talking about the excessive forward lean and kind of the lower back arching. To me, they're kind of tied together. So once we start to correct one, we can start to correct the other. So I'm doing my overhead squat assessment, right? And this is legit how mine was kind of is getting out of, but my forward lean is a little bit nuts. So it's really hard for me to keep my chest up, okay? So my back goes forward. If I'm looking at my tibia and my spine, they should be up in a straight line, kind of going parallel to each other, but they're not. My top half kind of bends forward a little bit too much. So from there, us as personal trainers, what we try to do is figure out how to diagnose where that problem's coming from. Oftentimes, people make the mistake of thinking it's just somewhere in your hips and your back, upper legs, things like that. But the kicker is, often it can be a lack of range of motion in your ankles because, so in my case, for example, so I played college basketball and college softball, sprained my ankle really terrible a couple different times. And so I've got limited range of motion in my ankles. So the way to kind of figure out if it's in your anterior tib and ankle area, as in the bottom of your leg, is you would put your heels kind of on, I'm using two 10-pound plates, or you can use whatever you want. Give you about an inch lift, and if going right there takes that lean out of it, then that kind of shows me that my biggest problem is more in the lower part of my leg, versus if I still kept that same forward lean, even though I took the flexion issue out of it, then I would know that it was more in my back, my hips, somewhere up in this area. So the thing is we can work on correcting both of them at a time, regardless of what it happens to be, because often it's also kind of a combination of both. A lot of us, almost everybody can use loosening up the hip flexors, things like that. So I'm going to run you through what all of them are. So I'm going to start out with SMR, meaning self-myofascial release. I'm going to use a foam roller. You can do this with like a smaller ball as well. If you don't have a foam roller at home, I highly suggest getting one, but if you don't want to, grab like a softball or something like that. It's going to be hard. It's not going to feel super pleasant, but it can happen. So I'm going to start with self-myofascial release because I've got to kind of loosen up those muscles and find like the tight points that are keeping them tight. So I'm going to start with my TFL. So essentially think about it like your hip pocket. That's kind of what I'm going for, trying to foam roll. You've got to be really careful when you start to foam roll your TFL because you can kind of go too high and get up in your hip joint and hit like where all your tendons and muscles and all that kind of stuff connects, and that's not where you want to go. So I'm going to go down from kind of my iliac crest, so I'm going to find right here, okay, and then I'm going to go down and shoot for right about my hip pocket. That's generally a pretty good spot to look at, and I'm going to sit on it with as much tension as I can handle and still be relaxed, and then I'm going to kind of just lay my other leg over top. So I'm sitting on top of my TFL, I'm getting some big deep breaths. The idea would be to move it just a tiny bit till you find that really tender spot and hold it there for about 30 to 90 seconds. Kind of just depends on what you can stand. So I'm just going to do that once, and then I'm going to go over, I'm going to do my other TFL, and then I'm going to work my way down. So next it would be kind of an issue in maybe the quadricep. So I'm going to go ahead and start at my knee and work my way up from there. So I like to just do both at a time because I can kind of keep that balance. If you want to get deeper into it, you can definitely do one at a time. It's going to get you a deeper relaxation. So, but I'm just going to do both at a time, and I'm going to start at the top of my knees and move just kind of 1 inch at a time until I find that spot that's I can feel that tension on. So if I wanted to just do it on this leg, I would pick up over here, or I can just come right down here on the side. And then if I want to get it deeper, I can go ahead and go right here and lift up my foot, and that's going to get me deeper down into it. Otherwise, I would just hold it on here for about 30 seconds, and then it would kind of keep moving my way up and find those different little tender points in my quad. Next, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the back, or my calf, what you would know as your calf, or kind of just coming up from your Achilles. So I'm going to start with my gastro. I'm going to start right here, the easiest way to do it is put that one foot over top, and then I'm just kind of hanging out right there, find that tension spot. But then I also want to go down towards the bottom part of it so that I can release that as well, because that's a lot of what's doing that, holding that ankle in place. So I've got to kind of release it. So I'm going to come down there and sit for about 30 seconds as well. I would do the other side, and then lastly, I would come up and I would do, the best way to describe it would be the outside of your butt or your piriformis. So I'm going to sit right over here, kind of on the outside here, leaning a little bit, and then pick this foot up, hold it right over here, and kind of just turn to the side. If you're doing this one, you will feel it almost instantly where I'm talking about. So I'm going to sit on that, and I'm going to release that, again, about 30 seconds. Then if you're seeing that lower back kind of arch as you're doing that forward lean, just to give it a little bit more while you're lying on your foam roller, you can come up and we can start to release those muscles in the upper back. So anytime I'm going from the upper back, middle of the back up, I turn my foam roller so that I can kind of go with the way that the muscles are going. So I'm going to go right here, kind of underneath my shoulder blade. And again, I'm going to find those more tender spots, and I'm going to start to release them by just kind of hanging on it for about 30 seconds. If I'm not really getting a deep stretch there, I can always add to it by moving my arms in and out or up and down, and that's going to get a little deeper down into that fascial tissue. And then I can also do my lower back, which I will warn you, anytime you're doing kind of from the middle back down, you really got to be careful, especially if you're not used to it. It can kind of just make things seize up if you're not used to it. So be careful with the amount of tension that you put on your lower back. But I'm going to start right there, and I'm just going to pick up my hips. And again, find that more tender spot, and I'm going to kind of let it loosen up. So once I've done that on my foam roller and started to loosen things up, then I've got to kind of stretch them out. So the order that I generally give people a warm-up would be to foam roll, and then I'm going to stretch. Once my muscles are a little bit warmer, I can actually stretch them and help them release. So I've got just 3 different stretches on here that are really going to kind of do the job for whatever problem is causing your forward lean. So I've got a kneeling hip flexor stretch. So I'm going to put one foot forward and the other one back. And the biggest thing with this, and it drives me bonkers, I see people just push everything out here and like, okay, that might be kind of stretching your hip flexor. But instead, I want you to think about moving your whole hip complex back and then just pushing that forward. You should really feel that deep stretch right in here. And then if you want it just a little bit more, you can pick that hand up and reach over top. And again, I'm going to hold that for about 30 seconds on each side. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab a seat on my back. I'm going to pull my knee up to my chest. I'm trying to stretch that piriformis area. So I'll pull my knee up to my chest, across, and right there, that's going to give me that good stretch. You should feel this almost instantly right there. And then our last 2 are going to be for the calf, and then kind of as you go lower down in the psoas area. So I'm going to come right here, and then I'm going to get that good stretch, calf stretch, your kind of standard calf stretch right here. And then if I want to get deeper, so more like top of the Achilles tendon up there, I'm really just going to move it forward a little bit, and I'm going to kind of just bend at my knees, and I'm going to feel that a little bit lower down. So essentially, it's kind of the same thing as the upper calf stretch, but it's going to get a little bit deeper, a little bit lower. And like I said, for me, that's where my big issue comes. And so then I'm going to try to strengthen things, right? Because strengthening, I've got to loosen some, I've got to strengthen others. So just a few different strengthening exercises that are going to help me out. Sorry, one last thought. As you're foam rolling, I want you to try to foam roll your anterior tibialis as well, because we want to loosen that up too. Front of the leg, especially if you're one of those people who realize that it was in your ankles, foam roll the front there, that's going to help out a lot. All right, so I'm going to do some strengthening, really basic strengthening exercises. You can do these over top of a chair. If you have a stability ball, great. I'm going to start with just a glute strengthening exercise. I'm just going to be right here, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my foot straight up and straight down. So that's all I'm going to do on each side. I want you to do 2 sets, 10 to 15 reps of each exercise, 3 to 5 times a week. So I'm going to do both sides on that. And then I'm gonna do, it's gonna kind of look like your normal Superman, but instead, I'm gonna have my hands down to the side. This is gonna help strengthen that lower part of the back that's not quite strong enough to kind of hold you up. So I'm gonna pick up everything right here, and I'm gonna hold for about a 5 count, and then I'm gonna go back down and do the same thing and hold for about a 5 count each time. You should really feel the pressure in your lower back while you're doing those. And then lastly, something to get to those internal core stabilizers, because that's a lot of why we can't keep that back up, is because we're not strong enough like on the inside of the core. So I'm going to do really simple bird dog. So opposite arm, opposite leg. I'm going to go straight out, and I'm going to slowly bring my knee to my elbow, doing about 15 on each side. Or you can come up in a plank and do a more advanced version of that right up here. But then the trouble is you start wobbling side to side, and if you're doing that, you're not really working on what we want to work on. So I think that's all I wanted to cover with that. And same as those knees in and out. You know, we've got to lengthen things, we've got to strengthen things, and that's the key to kind of correcting those muscle imbalances. So if you're having trouble get low on your squats, if you're leaning forward, really start doing some of this stuff while you have the time. It's going to make a huge difference. Also, a great warm-up when you're coming to camps. I suggest going through some of that stuff to get you warmed up. Let us know if we have any questions. I'm also going to do a video about this forward, the arms falling forward and your shoulders kind of rolling in. So if you have those rounded shoulders, stay tuned for that video. That's all I got.